The wind swept across the vast plains like a living spirit, carrying the scent of earth and smoke. Beneath the endless stretch of sky, Tasunke stood alone, his chest rising with the rhythm of anger and memory. The fire before him cracked and hissed, throwing light on the painted scars that marked his face and the sorrow that marked his heart. His people had been broken by men who came with iron, fire, and lies. The smoke from burned lodges still haunted his dreams. His sister's laughter, once the music of his mornings, had been stolen by those who saw the world as theirs to take. That night, as the stars gathered like witnesses above him, he made a vow to the Great Spirit. His words were sharp, carved from pain and silence. He promised to bring vengeance to those who had taken everything, to become the storm that they feared. It was not a vow made in weakness, but in the raw strength of a man who had lost everything that made him human. When dawn came, he mounted his horse, his heart a battlefield between rage and grief. His warriors rode behind him, faces painted, eyes set on the horizon. They struck like lightning upon a small settlement near the river. The people there never saw it coming. The flames rose higher than the cries, and among the chaos, Tasunke's eyes caught the figure of a woman, Alara. She did not fight. She did not flee. She stood frozen, holding on to a child's locket, her gaze locked on the destruction around her. Something in her stillness drew him in. Without knowing why, he captured her. Not out of mercy, not yet, but out of something deeper he could not name. He told her she was his prisoner until the full moon. Then, she would pay for what her people had done. He said it without emotion, like one delivering the will of the ancestors. The journey back to camp was long and silent. Ilara did not speak. The ropes around her wrists were tight, yet she did not resist. The way she looked at the land, not with fear, but with quiet recognition, unsettled him. He had expected screams, curses, tears. Instead, there was calm. It was as though she carried a secret the wind had not yet told him. When they reached the camp, he placed her in a small tent near the river, away from the others. His men looked at him with questions in their eyes. Why her? Why not end it? Tasunke did not answer. The vow he had sworn still burned in him, but something beneath that fire had begun to flicker differently. That night, he sat by the fire again. The same flames that once felt like justice now reflected uncertainty. He watched her from afar. She sat still, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, yet her eyes lifted to the sky with a strange peace. She whispered something softly, words he didn't understand, but the tone carried gratitude. Gratitude, even in captivity. He could not comprehend it. He tried to remind himself who she was, the daughter of the enemy, the bloodline of those who destroyed his family. Yet each time he looked at her, he saw not the enemy, but the reflection of something familiar. The strength in her silence reminded him of his sister, who once stood between fear and hope with that same quiet courage. The memory tore at him, a cruel twist of fate. He clenched his fists and walked away, but the sound of her voice, praying under the stars, followed him into the night. Days passed. He brought her food without words, watching how she handled even the smallest act with care. Breaking the bread, sharing with the injured bird near her tent, whispering thanks before eating. He found himself listening to her breath when she slept, not out of desire, but out of something that felt almost like reverence. It confused him, angered him, he had vowed to destroy. Yet now he was protecting what he was supposed to hate. One evening, when the fire burned low, he caught his reflection in the water. He no longer recognized the man staring back. The face was the same, the markings unchanged, but the eyes carried a question that had no answer. He wondered if the spirits were testing him. He had given his word to avenge, and yet each day that passed, the thought of harming her felt like striking against the very soul of the earth. He began to wonder if vengeance was the path, or if it was a shadow, leading him away from what his ancestors truly wanted. When he looked at Alara again, he realized his vow was not breaking, it was transforming. The anger that had fueled him was shifting into something else, something alive, something dangerous in its gentleness. She did not beg for freedom, yet she was freeing him from something he had never been able to escape. His heart, once hardened by loss, was beginning to soften. The warrior, who swore before the heavens to destroy, was slowly being undone by the quiet power of a woman who never needed to fight to be strong. He didn't understand it then. He only felt the change, deep and silent, like a river carving a canyon over time. And though the full moon was drawing near, Tasunke already knew, even if he could not admit it to himself, that when that night came, he would not be able to keep his vow. Something far greater than vengeance was awakening within him, and destiny had already begun to rewrite his story. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. The camp was surrounded by the song of the wind, the whisper of the grass, and the distant echo of drums calling from another world. Tasunke carried the weight of his vow, like a shadow that would not leave him, yet each time he looked at Alara, that shadow seemed to falter. She sat near the river most days, her hands tied but her spirit untouched. The sunlight fell softly over her, and though she was a captive, she carried herself with a strange grace, as though she belonged even here. Among people who saw her as an intruder, a threat, a reminder of everything they had lost. She spoke little, but when she did, her words lingered like the scent of wild sage after rain. One morning, Tasunke brought her water, and as he untied her wrists to let her drink, she said quietly, "You don't have to hate me." The words hit him harder than a blade. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Hate was the only thing that had kept him alive after everything had been taken. To release it felt like betraying the dead. Yet her tone was not one of defiance. It was understanding, as if she had known loss too deep to name. That evening, as the sun melted behind the plains, Tasunke watched her gather wildflowers near the edge of camp. She didn't know their Lakota names, yet she touched them as if she did. He remembered his mother's hands doing the same when she would pray for rain. It was strange how this woman from another world mirrored the ways of his people without knowing it. There was something in her spirit that reached beyond blood and tribe, something ancient and familiar. The others noticed his silence. His men whispered that he was growing weak, that the captive was clouding his judgment. One of them spat the words in anger. Tasunke's hand went to his knife, not to kill, but to silence the disrespect. "She is nothing," he lied, though the lie burned in his throat. When night came, he sat by the fire and told himself that the full moon would come soon, and all of this would end. But the thought no longer brought him peace. The image of her eyes, clear and still as water, haunted him. A few nights later, a storm came over the plains. The wind howled, tearing through the tents, and rain fell like 1,000 drums. Alara's tent began to collapse, and Tasunke rushed to her side without thinking. She was cold, trembling, her hair tangled with grass and rain. He cut the ropes that bound her and led her to shelter near his fire. She looked at him, confused, as if she didn't understand why her captor would protect her. "Because the spirits would not want me to let another soul freeze," he said, almost to himself. They sat there in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. The firelight flickered across their faces, and in that glow, they saw not enemies, but two souls scarred by the same pain. She told him of her family, of how they too had been driven from their home by war and greed. Her father had fought to protect what little they had, but in the end, violence consumed them all. Tasunke listened, his chest tightening with a pain he thought he buried long ago. He realized her story was not so different from his own. The enemy he had built in his mind was human now, fragile and broken in ways he understood all too well. When the storm passed, the world outside was quiet again, cleansed by rain. Elara looked up at the sky, the clouds parting to reveal a soft sliver of moonlight. "Hate is a hunger that never ends," she said softly. He turned toward her, the firelight catching the lines of his face. "You speak like someone who has carried it," he said. "I have," she answered, "and it almost destroyed me." Her voice trembled, but there was truth in it, truth that touched something deep inside him. After that night, something between them shifted. Tasunke no longer saw her as the enemy. He found himself listening to her hum, songs he didn't know, feeling the calm of her presence settle over him like morning mist. She began to teach the children in the camp, small words in her language, gestures of peace, laughter that made even the hardest warriors pause. She had found a way to exist among them, not by force, but by spirit. Each time he looked at her, Tasunke felt his vow weakening, yet it did not feel like failure. It felt like awakening. The rage that had filled his soul for so long was slowly being replaced by a question he could not answer. What if mercy was stronger than vengeance? What if the spirits had not sent her to be his punishment, but his lesson? He found himself standing by the river one night, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. He could hear her voice in his mind, calm and steady. Someone must stop feeding the hate. He had never believed such a thing was possible. Yet here he was, no longer certain who he was or what his vow meant. He had taken her as a symbol of everything he despised. Now she had become the mirror that showed him what he might become if he chose differently. For the first time since the fire of his rage had been lit, Tasunke felt something unfamiliar. Peace, trying to find a way back into his heart. The moon above was growing fuller each night, the night of his promise approaching. Yet he no longer knew if he feared it, because of what he might lose, or because of what he might finally understand. The full moon rose slowly, a pale and perfect circle above the darkened plains, bathing everything in silver. It was the night of Tasunke's vow, the night he had promised himself he would fulfill the oath sworn to the spirits. The night Elara was supposed to die. The camp was quiet, the fire low, and the air heavy with expectation. Every sound seemed sharper, the distant cry of a wolf, the rustle of the wind through the tall grass, the beating of his own heart. Tasunke sat alone by the flames, his knife lying across his knees, the steel catching the moonlight. It should have been easy. This was what he had waited for, what he had told himself was justice. But as the light touched his face, his hands trembled. He rose slowly and walked toward her tent. She was sitting outside, her eyes lifted to the sky, as if she knew this night carried meaning. She did not cry, did not plead. She looked almost peaceful. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her voice calm as the wind. "The moon, it looks like it's listening." Her words disarmed him. He stood over her, the knife still in his hand, and for a long time, he said nothing. He had imagined this moment so many times. Her fear, his vengeance, the satisfaction of completing his vow. But the reality of her quietness, her lack of fear, struck him with a force stronger than any weapon. "Do you not fear death?" he asked finally, his voice low. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "I have lived with it beside me for a long time," she said. "It no longer frightens me. What frightens me is what hate turns us into." Her words sank into him like the edge of a blade turned inward. He wanted to be angry, wanted to remind himself that she was the enemy, that her people had burned his home and slaughtered his kin. But the truth was no longer clear. The world was no longer divided between right and wrong, good and evil. It was made of pain shared across different faces. He took a step closer, the moonlight bright on his skin. "You do not understand," he said. "I gave my word to the spirits. I swore that I would take from your kind what was taken from mine." Her eyes softened. "And if you do this," she asked, "will it bring them back? Will it make your heart whole again?" He felt his breath catch, and for a moment, the silence between them was louder than thunder. He could not answer, because deep down, he already knew the truth. No blood would ever fill the emptiness left by love lost. She stood slowly, her chains clinking against one another, and stepped toward him. "You think vengeance will honor the dead," she whispered, "but it only keeps them bound to the pain that destroyed them." He looked away, his jaw tight. "You speak of things you do not know." "I know loss," she said. "I know watching people you love vanish, and I know what it is to let that pain eat away at what's left of you until there is nothing but anger. I carried that too, until I realized hate does not heal. It just continues the wound." The knife in his hand felt heavier. The air between them seemed alive with the heartbeat of something ancient. He had taken lives before. He had felt the satisfaction of battle, the cry of victory. But tonight there was no triumph here, only the unbearable weight of choice. He could end her life and keep his vow, or he could spare her and lose everything he believed made him strong. The fire crackled behind him, and for a moment, he saw his sister's face in the glow. Her gentle eyes, her laughter like the song of water. He remembered how she had always spoken of mercy, how she believed that strength was not in killing, but in forgiving. It was her spirit he had been chasing all this time, not vengeance. Ilara's eyes reflected that same light, that same unbroken faith in something beyond the reach of pain. The knife slipped from his hand and fell to the ground with a dull thud. He turned away, his shoulders shaking, not with weakness, but with release. "Go," he said quietly. "Run before I change my mind." She stood still, unmoving. "Why?" she asked. His voice cracked. "Because I cannot do this. Because when I look at you, I see what I lost. I see what I could be if I let go." For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't the relief of someone escaping death. It was gratitude for something deeper. She stepped past him and walked into the darkness, her figure slowly disappearing into the silver mist of the plains. He watched her until she was gone, the ache in his chest both painful and freeing. When the moon reached its highest point, Tasunke stood alone beneath it. the vow he had sworn now broken. But in its breaking, he felt something sacred awaken. The wind moved around him like a living spirit, and he thought he heard the faint echo of his sister's voice, not of anger, but of peace. He had set out to destroy what had hurt him, but instead, he had freed himself from the endless hunger of hate. The warrior who once vowed to take life had given it back, and though he could not yet understand it, destiny had already begun to shape his new path. The vow he had sworn was gone, but in its ashes, a new promise was waiting to be born. The storm had passed, but its memory clung to the sky like a bruise. The horizon was pale, streaked with smoke from the burning plains where battles had raged for days. The settlers had come for revenge. They had seen the smoke of Lakota fires and followed it with fury, driven by loss, by fear, by the same kind of pain that once burned inside Tasunke's heart. The wind carried the scent of destruction again, the same scent that had haunted him for years. The smell of blood, ashes, and the earth crying beneath wounded feet. Tasunke fought as he always had, with the spirit of a wolf cornered and unwilling to yield. His people scattered through the tall grass. Women and children running toward the river, warriors shouting prayers to the Great Spirit as bullets tore through the dawn. He struck down enemies with a rage he thought he had buried, his body moving like a ghost among them. But there were too many, and his strength was fading. A shot rang out, piercing his shoulder, and another grazed his ribs. He fell to his knees, the world spinning around him, the roar of battle fading into silence. He pressed his hand against the wound, his blood mixing with the soil, and whispered a prayer for his ancestors to guide him home. He did not know how far he crawled before he collapsed beside the river. The same river where he had once tied Alara's wrists, the same place where he had watched her pray under the moon. Now the water beside him rippled with the reflection of his blood, and he thought, perhaps this was the end the spirits had always planned for him, to die by the river where his vow had changed. He closed his eyes and waited for the darkness to take him. But when he opened them again, it was not the faces of his ancestors he saw. It was hers. Ilara knelt beside him, her hands trembling, but steady enough to press against his wound. Her eyes were filled with a fierce determination that defied the fear around them. She had returned. Against every instinct, against every reason, she had come back. Why? He rasped, barely able to speak. You should have run. Her voice shook, but did not break. I couldn't. She tore a strip from her dress and pressed it to the wound, her hands slick with his blood. You broke your vow that night, she said softly. Now I will keep mine. His breath was ragged. What vow? He managed. She looked into his eyes, her face streaked with dirt and tears. To heal what hatred has broken. The words carried the weight of something sacred. She stayed with him through the night, washing his wounds with water from the river, whispering prayers of both her people and his. The war cries faded in the distance, and the land fell silent, except for the sound of her voice and the river's endless murmur. Tasunke felt his life slipping away, but with every word she spoke, something within him fought to stay. She did not see a warrior or an enemy. She saw a man who had lost too much to let hate claim what little was left. As dawn broke, the light touched her face, and for a moment, he thought she looked like the spirits he had seen in visions. Fragile and strong, a bridge between two worlds. His strength returned slowly, carried by her care, her faith, her unyielding will. She gathered herbs she remembered him using and pressed them to his wounds, mimicking what she had seen him do weeks before. Her touch was gentle, her words steady, and each breath he took felt less like survival and more like rebirth. When he could finally speak again, his voice was hoarse. "You could have left me to die," he said. She smiled faintly. "So could you have, long ago." The truth of her words struck deep. The cycle they had both been caught in, violence feeding violence, grief feeding grief, had brought them to this very moment. Yet here, by the river that had once divided captor and captive, something else was being born. Forgiveness was taking root, fragile but real. In the days that followed, Ilara built a small shelter near the river's edge. She tended to him as he healed, sharing what little food she had, refusing to let him fade into the silence. There were moments when he would wake in the night, haunted by dreams of battle, and she would calm him with quiet words. He began to tell her stories of his people, the songs sung to the stars, the teachings of the old ways, the belief that every soul is part of the same great circle. She listened, her eyes shining, and then shared her own faith, the prayers her mother taught her in the stillness of hardship. Their worlds had been enemies, but their hearts spoke the same language: loss, hope, and the will to begin again. By the time Tsunke could stand, the wound on his shoulder had closed, but another wound, the one inside his spirit, had begun to heal too. He no longer looked at Ilara as a reminder of his suffering. She was the proof that even the deepest pain could be transformed into something sacred. As they stood by the river together, the water reflecting the sky's soft gold, Tsunke felt a peace he hadn't known since childhood. "You healed me," he said quietly. Ilara shook her head. "No," she whispered. "You healed yourself when you chose not to hate." The wind moved through the grass like a sigh of relief, and for the first time, Tsunke understood the meaning of the spirits. Silence all these years. They had not abandoned him. They had been waiting. For this, for her, for the moment when vengeance would give way to love. The days melted into one another, marked not by the rhythm of battle, but by the gentle pulse of healing. The forest became their sanctuary, its vastness hiding them from both settlers and tribes who would not understand what had begun between them. The air there was different, soft, fragrant with pine and wildflowers. The river that had once run red with blood now shimmered clear and calm, like a new beginning, whispering through the earth. Tsunke awoke each morning to the sound of water moving and the rustle of Ilara's footsteps as she gathered herbs or started a fire. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of silence without fear. It was not the silence of grief, it was peace. Each day, strength returned to his body, but something deeper was being rebuilt too. He had spent his life believing that power came from vengeance, from being unbreakable. Yet now, watching Ilara work in quiet devotion, he began to understand that true strength lived in gentleness. She taught him things that had nothing to do with war: the patience of growing plants, the care in preparing food, the sacredness of stillness. He, in turn, taught her the language of the wind, the stories his grandfather once told about how every living thing carried a spirit. They became each other's teachers, each other's mirrors, reflecting back what the other had lost. Sometimes at night, they would sit beside the fire, saying nothing at all, the crackle of the wood, the dance of the flames, the hush of the forest, all of it spoke for them. He would glance at her and see how the firelight softened her face, how her eyes carried both sadness and hope. He wondered how such light could come from someone who had seen so much darkness. She too would look at him, this man once ruled by fury, now quiet as the earth after rain, and see a different kind of warrior. Not one made of weapons and scars, but one learning the courage it takes to forgive. When his wounds had healed completely, Tasunke began carving again. His hands, once meant for battle, now shaped wood into small figures of animals, each one carrying meaning. The wolf for loyalty, the eagle for vision, the buffalo for endurance. Ilara watched him, fascinated, as he breathed life into the wood with nothing but patience and focus. "You create with the same hands that once destroyed," she said softly. He paused, looking down at his calloused fingers. "Maybe that's the way it must be," he replied. "The same hands that break must also learn how to mend." The world outside their sanctuary still burned. News reached them through whispers of travelers passing through. The war between settlers and tribes was spreading. More lives lost to the same cycle of fear and revenge. Sometimes, Tasunke would grow restless, guilt pressing heavy on his chest. "My people suffer," he said one night, his voice low. "I should be with them." Ilara looked at him, her eyes full of knowing. "You are with them," she said. "You're carrying what they've forgotten, what peace looks like." He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Deep down, he knew she was right. The spirits had not called him to keep fighting. They had called him to remember what living meant. As days turned to weeks, they found a rhythm that felt almost sacred. She would hum songs from her childhood, melodies unfamiliar, yet somehow fitting among the whispering trees. He would answer with old Lakota chants, their tones weaving together like two rivers meeting. There were moments when words were unnecessary, when the connection between them felt older than either of their lives, as if it had been written by something beyond time. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the forest in gold, Tasunke spoke softly, almost to himself. "I once thought the spirits punished me when I lost everything. But now I think they were preparing me to understand this." Ilara turned to him. "Understand what?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. "That love is not the opposite of pain. It is born from it. It is the healing that pain was always meant to lead us toward." She said nothing, only reached out and took his hand. Their fingers intertwined like roots beneath the soil, unspoken promises growing between them. Time did not erase their scars, but it gave them meaning. They were both reminders and testaments of survival. Tasunke began to see that his vow had not been broken after all. It had transformed. When he swore to avenge his sister, he had misunderstood the message the spirits whispered through grief. They had not wanted him to destroy. They had wanted him to remember that love itself is the truest act of vengeance against hatred. In choosing compassion, he was honoring what had been lost in the only way that mattered, by ensuring it would not be lost again. One morning, the sky broke open in a soft dawn. Birds called through the trees, and the world smelled new. Ilara stood at the edge of the river, her reflection rippling in the water. Tasunke walked to her side, the quiet between them, comfortable and full. "You once said hate is a hunger that never ends," he murmured. She nodded, smiling faintly. "And now?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Now I know love is the only hunger worth keeping." He watched her words settle in the air like prayer smoke, rising toward the heavens. The wind shifted, and he felt the presence of the ancestors, his sister, his family, the countless voices of his people. They were not angry, they were at peace. And for the first time, he felt he was too. What had begun as a vow of destruction had become a promise of life. What had been taken from him had returned in another form, something purer, something eternal. The warrior was still there, but now he fought for something greater than vengeance. He fought for the rebirth of his own spirit. When the snows melted and spring returned to the plains, the world seemed reborn. The long silence of winter broke under the songs of returning birds and the hum of wind through tall grass. Tasunke stood at the edge of the valley, the sun warm on his skin, the horizon glowing with life again. Months had passed since he had last seen his people. He had healed, body and soul, within the shelter of the forest, guided not by rage, but by something gentler, something that had no name in any language he knew. Ilara stood beside him now, her hair catching the light, her eyes tracing the distant smoke that rose from the camp far across the plain. That smoke called him home. It was time. They began their journey at dawn, walking side by side, the river flowing beside them like an old friend. Neither spoke much, but their silence was not empty. Each step they took carried the weight of what they had endured and the quiet hope of what was to come. When they reached the familiar ground of Tasunke's tribe, the earth felt sacred beneath his feet. Yet, as he saw the faces that turned toward him, his brothers, his elders, his people, he knew the path ahead would not be simple. To them, Ilara was still the enemy, the face of those who had brought destruction. Her presence by his side would stir anger, suspicion, even hatred. But he also knew that peace never comes without risk. The camp fell into stillness when they entered. Tasunke's return was a miracle. Many had believed him dead. The elders gathered, their eyes sharp, their voices low. They saw the woman beside him and whispered among themselves. One of them, an old man with hair white as snow, stepped forward. "You bring her here?" he asked. "A daughter of those who have taken from us? Have you forgotten who you are?" Tasunke looked at him, his voice steady but soft. "I remember who I am," he said, "but I have learned who I was meant to become." He stood before his people, the same warrior who once swore vengeance in their name, and felt the power of truth rise in his chest. "I have carried hate," he said. "It filled me until there was no room for anything else. I thought it gave me strength, but it was only stealing from me what it had already taken, my spirit." The crowd murmured, uncertain, restless. Ilara lowered her gaze, her hands folded tightly together. Tasunke continued, "This woman you see, she was once my captive. I took her because I wanted to hurt the world that had hurt me. But the spirits did not send her to die by my hand. They sent her to remind me what it means to live." He spoke then of what had happened by the river, the breaking of his vow, the healing that followed, the lessons that came not from battle, but from mercy. His voice carried across the camp, carried by the same wind that once bore his war cries. The old ways teach that strength is in the heart that endures, and the greatest endurance is to love when the world teaches you to hate. The spirits do not want more blood. They want balance. The people listened, some in awe, some in disbelief. One young warrior stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You ask us to forgive those who burned our homes?" he shouted. "To let the dead go unavenged?" Tasunke met his gaze. "No," he said softly. "I ask you to honor them in a way that does not create more dead." He paused, then added, "Every act of revenge feeds the fire that took them from us. But every act of compassion feeds the light that can keep us alive." Silence fell again, deep and heavy. The old man, who had first spoken, finally nodded. "You speak with the voice of one who has walked through both life and death," he said. "Perhaps the spirits have changed their song." Slowly, one by one, others lowered their weapons, their eyes turning not to Ilara, but to Tasunke, their warrior reborn, not as a killer, but as a teacher of peace. Ilara stood quietly beside him, tears glistening in her eyes, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was witnessing. The world that had once been torn between them was beginning, however faintly, to heal. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the plains in gold and red, Tasunke lit a small fire at the center of the camp. His people gathered around, and Ilara sat beside him. Together they sang, a song of the earth, of forgiveness, of beginnings. The children watched with wide eyes. The elders listened with solemn hearts. And for the first time in a long while, hope seemed to rise from the ashes. Later, as night wrapped the camp in quiet, Ilara turned to him. "Do you think they will ever accept me?" she asked. Tasunke looked into the flames. "Perhaps not all," he said. "But peace is not born in a day. It begins with one fire, one heart willing to keep it alive." She smiled faintly. "Then we keep it alive," she whispered. The stars spread across the sky like blessings, and the wind moved through the plains with a sound like laughter. Tasunke closed his eyes, hearing the voices of his ancestors not as cries of war, but as songs of rest. The vow he had once made beneath the same stars had become something else entirely. It was no longer a promise of destruction. It was a prayer of rebirth. He reached for Ilara's hand, and together they watched the fire burn steady and bright, its light reaching beyond the camp, beyond the pain, into the heart of a future neither of them had ever dared to imagine.